Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining today, our third episode of the Club 21M podcast. This is your host, Crypto Gordon Freeman. I'd like to give a shout out to my partners, Kakashi and the guys at Crypto Cringe Show. So I'm excited to be doing this third episode of Club 21M, the podcast. This is Crypto Gordon Freeman. And today's episode is going to be on a topic that is familiar to people inside of crypto, not so much for people outside of it, proof of work. Now, this is not that comprehensive intro to proof of work. This is an assumption that once you get the concept, you'll understand why it matters in the perspective of some things that have been going on. So I often like to take some time to look at our place in history. And so there'll probably be two clear parallel paths to what you will find with these podcasts, which is one of them being an introduction to help make people familiar to crypto, but doing it in such a way that I introduce ideas that are interesting to people that are already in the space. The other being that I like to not just, hammer out, 10-minute videos of today in crypto news. Rather, I like to look at where we are in our place in time, because I think that every day is an historical day in crypto. Things are changing so quickly. And if you don't capture little pieces of what you think we should be gaining from and maybe projecting where we're headed, then a lot is lost in that moment in time. So over the past several months, proof of work has been a really important, interesting topic because there's a lot of concern in the world that is highly politicized about man-made climate change and the effects of energy use or the use of electricity. Now, this goes way back. This is not a history lesson and this is not a political take on things, but I find it almost impossible not to go there. Once you see the origin of the species, once you see where these things have originated. So the legitimate side of things, I think, is that not every resource on planet Earth is an infinite supply. There are limited resources. But I also think that nature gives us signals of what to innovate. And so if gravity says that we're meant to be stuck on the ground, then somebody might be inspired to look up at the birds flying around and say, how can we do that? And innovation is about overcoming those obstacles. So my personal view on electricity and energy use is that it's very clear that if Bitcoin were a linear invention, a linear technology that wasn't designed to scale into itself, then as it became more popular, it might hit a point in time where the incentive to overuse electricity could very quickly scale beyond the actual value of what you're trying to do with it. Meaning that if enough people got interested in mining and it got really cheap, really quick, and you were able to get the same number of Bitcoins out that you could 5, 6, 7 years ago, and the difficulty remained the same, then I think a lot of the arguments about the dangers of how much electricity can be used in the process of running all this hardware are not only valid, but I think would be more alarming. The problem that I see over the past week or so is not the only time, but Elizabeth Warren has suddenly discovered that proof of work is a thing. And if you back up a few weeks before that, it was a few others. And if you back up a few weeks before that, we've had really 3 different China bans happen since late last year. We had a coal mine disaster that led to a massive outage in China. And knowing that it was the hot climate time for climate change, it's really hard to tell whether this was a legitimate thing that happened or whether the CCP was building dialogue against Bitcoin. So the fact that it affected more than 10-15% of the Bitcoin network, this outage, was kind of those early tremors before an earthquake. When the next ban that was announced, they spoke specifically to not allowing any cryptocurrency transactions. If this was a warning to the business sector no transacting in crypto. But it was a continued crackdown on banning that was outside of the corporate structure agreement with the CCP. Then the next ban was an all-out ban on mining in a large region where I think about 30% of the world's mining was taking place of Bitcoin. I should specify mining meaning machines running to run the Bitcoin network and to handle transactions. So the good thing about that is we got to see that strategy, integrity, and the economic game theory behind Bitcoin was resilient. So cryptocurrency proof of work, we have seen that basically what this is pushing to the top is the issue or the controversy over electricity and the value that cryptocurrency brings. So first of all, I'd say, Bitcoin has been around for almost 12 years, maybe even 12 years. I should probably look at that date. 12 years seems like an awful long time to wait to discover that using Bitcoin uses electricity. You can actually look in 2011, 12, 13, the early Bitcoin forums and discussions surrounding such. There were people that didn't understand what happens to mining when these difficulties in the future would take place. Remember, the first year or two of Bitcoin, nobody had experienced a Bitcoin halving or halving event. The difficulty had not gone up and the number of coins that you get had not been cut in half. And so everything was, okay, it works, and then everything beyond that is theory. I would say that, the people who were concerned about, how does this scale from me using it on my laptop to needing to buy expensive hardware, and there was a lag in hardware being made, and a lot of people lost a lot of money because by the time they were able to mine, their mining equipment wouldn't work anymore. It was too laborious. It was too much of a bog on the system to work. So the fact that the early arguments included an understanding that things would go from individual and private sector more and more to an industrial version of running what we now would call like mining farms speaks to me that they understood what the arguments against proof of work would be. So I need to get back to Michael Saylor and MicroStrategies and what happened there. From 2020 being a rather rowdy year, a lot of economic concerns, wanting to find a safe store of value to preserve the value of the growth in his company and to not have such a drastic depreciation pull from inflation, that Bitcoin is the thing that he had heard of for years, but it was the miracle that he was looking for, that the light bulb went on and he realized the significance of what Bitcoin could do. So first of all, I admire when somebody goes all in on something. He's made his stand, but I also think that there's a lot for all of us to learn, given the fact that what he does is analytics. Analytics that most of us would not know to look for, that have been valuable to other companies and tech companies especially. It sounds to me, and I would love to study this more because it's a field that I have no clue about, but the things that he learned in MIT, he actually had a friend in one of the classes that is kind of the basis for his business that he built that went public. But, he learned a lot of that strategy and how the analytics would work directly from academia. So the fact that he applies it and it works is kind of cool. Michael Saylor buys more than $1 billion of Bitcoin. Elon Musk says, hey, I got to do that. Over $1 billion worth of Bitcoin. And, we must remember that he relies on making very large deals with governments. And the future in where government is headed is in green jobs. There's going to be a lot of that. And green energy is probably will be one of the economically largest growing sectors, which I also think is interesting because we talk about millions of new jobs, millions of new green jobs, but logically, it's the sector where you would want to automate as many smart things as you possibly could. So we'll see where that heads. Elon Musk, there are a lot of different sides to him. You could say one possibility of the strategic moves that he makes are some of the moves that he makes are spontaneous, and spontaneous is not necessarily a good thing when it's a really big move. Maybe he has a little bit too much fun trying to be like us goofy people on crypto Twitter and thinking, a funny meme or a clever saying. It's fun to see the impact that it has, but maybe it's easy to way underestimate what's going to happen as a result of the things that are said or done. But I think more likely there are people that I kind of imagine as the handlers from behind the scene, the forces of governments that have a very tight plan for how the energy sector is supposed to keep people in line. Let me just put it that way. And so there is a war brewing between governments wanting central bank digital currencies and wanting to make arrangements to allow the flow of store of wealth, not just store of value, but store of wealth, with bankers and investment firms to be able to buy up the supplies of things that are scarce. So, and that's much bigger than crypto, but since it's also happening in crypto, I don't think that it's any mistake that people like Elon are in kind of all of those future tech sectors at the same time. Doge is one silly little part of it. Bitcoin is one very small fraction of that future economy, but an important one. So there's a lot of different possibilities going on there, but I think that the pressure was applied to Elon, and he was suddenly reeled back in to realize, hey, you have to play by these rules. And so no sooner did he say Tesla's going to take payments in Bitcoin than he said Tesla's not going to take payments in Bitcoin because, whoops, did you notice it uses electricity? As if that wasn't known, Mr. Lithium. So it's also a very familiar move as what the CCP did, which is an incredibly important and delicate contract for Elon. So all these things are interconnected. But Michael Saylor, now being a public name within our sector that is important to the kind of thought leadership that could provide stability in people's confidence to invest, fires back by saying, oh yeah, well, Bitcoin Mining Council. I've already got all this data that shows that some of the data about energy use is not correct. But my position is that you have to be really careful with statistics because we're all taking the word for certain things from agencies that have ulterior motives. It's just the truth. And regardless of where you land on things, the United Nations has hundreds, if not thousands now, of what they call NGOs or non-governmental organizations. The point being that through organizations that should be controlled lobby groups, things are done for the purpose of research and statistical information. And a lot of the times you start at the end saying, we need statistics to prove this point, go and get them. And we find that especially in education, we find it in health, we find it in other areas that people may not see the connection to the hot topic issues that they're connected to. But this is an important thing to understand, that whether you are a true believer to one extreme where you think, we have plenty of fossil fuel, we have plenty of coal, we have, plenty of oil, et cetera. We don't need to worry about something as important to the future economy as energy use. We got plenty of energy. You could be to the other extreme and say, all of these things are finite and we're going to run into serious trouble if we don't do something. Plus, look at what it's doing to the environment, et cetera, et cetera. And you can say, the future is in hydro and solar and wind and all these different things. Volcanoes. What could be cooler than volcanoes, really? But the man behind the screen, Wizard of Oz type thing, in my opinion, the who and the why behind things matter just as much, if not more, than what the truth is that is being pushed, what the itinerary. So I look at things from the perspective of, I like invention, I like science, I like efficiency. And if smart things can become smarter through efficiency, then that's really cool. So there's this cool thing called Moore's Law. And once again, this is just me talking. In Moore's Law, there was, I believe in the 80s, basically looking at the cost of supplies and the rate of growth in technology, several different economic structures, several different limitations in actual atomic particle technology stuff. And Moore was basically projecting that there was not a linear, but an exponential growth to, let's look at it in this situation, what computers can do. So every time a new chip comes out, the processor, the RAM, the hard drives, all these different things that go into a single computer, as we think of it, it seems like every year there's a doubling. And if you double what you had before, it's not, 2 times 2 is 4, add another 2, it's 6, add another 2, it's 8. It's 2 times 2 is 4, times 4 is 16. So you make these huge leaps. You don't go from 2 to 4 to 8 to 16. You see 2, 4, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, 1024, 2048, 5012, I think. You do enough audio software programming and start to remember those things. 90 something. Well, okay, I'm done. I'm not trying anymore. But you have, power of 2 exponential growth. And that has been pretty much projected and accurate all the way down to somewhere around where we are, which is that you can't get the atoms any closer to each other, the size that they have shrunk these chips down to. Semiconductors will actually start to lose efficiency if they get any smaller and closer together. So now there are some who are trying to build upwards, create stacks that can use the same space but give more power. There are others trying to think of entirely new ways to design things to try to get to continue to scale Moore's Law. The reason that matters is because the creator of Bitcoin was factoring in Moore's Law. The idea being that as there were concerns about electricity use, and especially if this were to become more highly politicized, that the actual items used for mining, if you have exponential growth in reducing heat, reducing size, so space is less of a factor, reducing the amount of energy that something takes to run, and it costs less and less to get there, then what you have is the same computer. If you bought a new computer every single time one of those doublings took place, you'd essentially be using the same space as you had before with a lot more going on. But then it starts to get a little smaller, a little lighter, the battery runs longer. A computer that's twice as powerful as your one from 3 or 4 years ago now actually cost a couple of $100 less. And we've seen exactly that kind of thing happen. Therefore, when you have 2, 3, 4 years and there's a Bitcoin happening, something gets more difficult as the machines are meant to use essentially the same amount of electricity to do 4 times, maybe 8 times more than they were capable of several years back. And on the electricity front, the world should be looking for solutions to make energy more freely available, lower in cost, and that there would be sectors in society where there were better advantages for using better types of electricity, or electricity that is better suited to something like Bitcoin's technology. So it's a really fascinating field, because if you look at things fairly and try to take the concerns that are legitimate about there always being a government level play for control, data in the tech sector, in the social media platforms, in large billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar corporations, and at a government level, data is a means for control. And it is not conspiratorial to see that in human nature, there are cycles that lead to tyrants. And we may throw around those types of terms at people that we don't like, but the truth is that there is a slow scaling in that direction, and it's not a good thing. This is not that commentary on that stuff, but it involves that. So electricity and efficiency should be about serving the people, doing so at cost, and not blowing up the world at the same time. That is a simple thing to stick with. Clean air, clean water, good prices for things, good jobs. People are a valuable thing, not to be placed lower and lower on the totem pole. And so the things that serve us well should be a high value, high priority. So Elon Musk says Tesla's not going to take Bitcoin until Bitcoin is using more renewable energy and is nicer to the earth. And Michael Saylor says we really shouldn't throw criticism at something that we don't know the actual figures for. I'm going to get some of the North American miners together and create the Bitcoin Mining Council. And Elon, you're invited. And of course, the news comes out that Elon creates Bitcoin Mining Council to gauge just how far mining is from being based on more than 50% renewable energy. So, of course, that's how things get played. And people may or may not understand that that's not really what happened. But they had a couple of public calls that you could be on. And I was happy to be on one of those. And these are mining companies that they may have slightly different ways of going about their business, and they may not all be purely good guys. I really don't know. But from what I heard is that this is not some kind of centralization thing. Crypto people are very scared of centralization. This is the sharing of data willingly to show that Bitcoin offers incentive to companies to find efficiency. And I think that the truth is showing, if the numbers are accurate, 56% renewable energy already, and they're all working towards being even more so. I personally put a higher value on cost effectiveness in order to allow this to scale. But that really does get into economic theory, because some would say that that's the tail wagging the dog. Others would say you've got your cause and effect wrong. I think that to the same degree, let's do hit on this on politics a little bit. If you have one side that believes that we need to back off regulation to allow businesses to grow without fear, and that allows them to hire more and expand more, and then we'll see where we are in 4 years. That's one approach. Another approach would be to say that we need to control the greedy runaway capitalist system and provide the structure so that whatever does grow grows in the direction that we want it to. Terrible oversimplification of both sides. There are possibilities that both of those things are a good thing. Perhaps sometimes it's better to shift certain regulations in the proper direction to where they don't interfere, they don't get in the way of growth, but they do kind of what I'm describing what nature does, which nature provides limitations that can help to inspire invention. So if gravity says we can't get off the ground, but we see birds up above, somebody decides to build a plane and we can fly. In this case, Moore's law says that things can get faster and cheaper, and they can use less energy, which means that they can be produced for less. The solutions to the solutions now are processing on things that are 4 times faster and more efficient and et cetera, more powerful. So those things should give us better energy, which logically is cleaner energy, which logically is some real form of renewable. Borrowing from all the greatest of sci-fi, the warnings that come along with that, Bitcoin is such a perfect target and a prime target to see that proof of work may not so much be the only way to go about things. And there's proof of stake, and that may not be the only way to go about things as well, either, in addition to also. So proof of work, something that you'll want to understand is that blockchain technology is about a decentralized network with a public ledger. Anybody can see it. Anybody can explore what's on it. And it's meant to keep all of the transactions up to date and fraud free, and to de-incentivize people to game the network for bad reasons. So proof of work operates this network essentially by giving Bitcoin as a reward for people to consume a lot of energy by doing tough math problems that guarantee the cryptography keeps the network secure, and that people's transactions get through, let's pretend to say, in a timely manner. And it is actually the network's relationship with electricity that helps to provide that layer of security. So one of the questions that proof of work brings is what Bitcoin does and what it is valuable enough to justify its current energy consumption. So instead of throwing the actual amount of energy being used and a lot of the things that some form of statistics will rise to the surface. I don't know if they will necessarily be the true ones or not. But I look at something that is even more of a comparison, which is that we have a global network of computers. And I would say that probably within a family unit in most countries that are not suffering economically, let's not rule out third world countries because they have their own ways of dealing with technology. Really cool, clever ways, actually. But let's assume North America, Europe, the major cities around the world, families probably have a desktop, a laptop, and every individual has a smartphone, and every smartphone has charging stations. Okay. With that being the case, let's just say that if you have 1 billion people, and among those, there are 5 different ways that their computers use energy, then I think that you would probably take a better path instead of saying, get rid of all the computers. That you would say, let's stay on the path of making laptops that are lighter, that are more powerful, whose parts are more compact. And just one example, let's look at something like the solid-state drives that have the potential to radically reduce the amount of heat that is going on underneath the hood in a computer, and also the space, because if you don't have the disk platter that has to be kept stable in the same manner, then there's a lot of different things in the design that you can change around and make cool. So there's a lot that I don't know about what it takes from here to make RAM more efficient and faster. What about the code? The main operating systems for Mac OS and for PC with Windows are really and truly, they're terribly inefficient, still based on codes that are lots and lots of chunks of previous ideas. Now, Windows years ago was actually still built on DOS, and then they finally got a DOS-free version that then they placed DOS inside of a shell that would crash Windows. It was really fun. But the point being that there are places to become more efficient before you go banning computers. I would hate to see a one desktop per family policy start to sweep the nation because of a fear put out there by some politicians with an agenda. As much as most people did not like the Cold War McCarthyism, the truth of the matter is that we also should not like what it was fighting against. We should not want covert spies planted in American industries trying to implant communism into our country. We don't want to go the way of North Korea and the CCP. Wow, I'm just pulling out all the hits today. I believe that allowing a market to learn its way through innovation and efficiency, and to encourage things to taper off where the problems are, and to strive vigorously towards solutions instead of the CCP's way of lowering the ban hammer. Now, here's another interesting thing to look at, and all of this is about proof of work, every single bit of it. The CCP, if they are more clever than the way that people are perceiving, I can't believe they're banning Bitcoin. It's so stupid. They're going to get so far behind. There's a couple of ways to look at this, and I'll cover it on its own topic. The CCP is the first to be, at least on their scale, to be getting their digital yuan, the CBDC, out there, the central bank digital currency, their digital legal tender. And I think that it's up to there are 21 million people using it, and there's been about 70 million wallet transactions or something. But they are programming into that all sorts of things that we don't want, and then they're lying about it. So that's not great. But one could say that, okay, they see that they're beyond the pilot program and their digital cash is working, so ban Bitcoin. That may be how simple it is. And you know what? If that is the case and they are using blockchain, you don't have to. But if they are using blockchain technology and they do need to set up and spread across certain regions the infrastructure to handle their digital currency, then that could be a reason to kick out the miners and say, now it's the government stuff. That is possible. Another very big concern is whether they have been more diligently studying the Stalin method of a lot of the things that they would share in common, although there's a lot of differences. What if, this is a big what if, But if it turns out to be true, you heard it first here from Crypto Gordon Freeman. If it's the case that they're playing a very, very clever thing, then they are kicking out the miners, but these are trained assets of the CCP. In which case, we are giving them a big welcome and a big hug and saying, come set up here. And we're basically welcoming spies right in the center of our future tech economy. That would not be such a good thing. So if we're going to have more innovation in American Bitcoin mining, it is not at all against any people, but in the protection of freedom-based ideologies, we need to not just assume that the Chinese miners, as in the actual people, not the mining equipment, but that too, we need to not just assume that these are Bitcoin refugees to take in and to set up shop. We might want to be more localized in what we're setting up for the safety of information spying and things that are known to still be done that way. There are entire communities around our country that are known to have little pockets of Russian cells that's all they do is pass information home. There's long been an assumption that a lot of the chips that pass through mainland China probably already have backdoors built into them, and I'm not smart enough to know whether that's true or not. So there's a lot of different things going on, from the Michael Saylor to the Elon Musk. Elon Musk is kind of one foot in one place, one in the other. Not sure that he is completely free to speak the man Elon Musk's ideas compared to SpaceX, Tesla, needing to keep a lot of contracts going. He's kind of proving something for the first time, which is when you have the private sector resolving things that used to take governments, but you're doing it with government contracts, which means, can you live at peace with a democracy or a republic and a communist regime at the same time? I don't know. I'm glad it's not up for me to try to figure that one out. So proof of work, it should not use as much energy as it does, but there's something really smart about the reason that it needs it. So it's easy to say as we go along, if it's not necessary to use energy, really should it? And I think that that might be valid for something that is not as potentially important to global economics. Bitcoin doesn't have to be the only thing being treated with so much value, but because it's been around the longest, because it is the one that banks are going to approve, and most countries will not be able to avoid opening its door to a store of value that is now more competitive than gold, though a fraction of the, somewhere between 200 and 400 trillion dollars of bonds and securities and all this other stuff, fake money built on money on top of money. It's such a small fraction of that now, but it seems to me that it's very possible that the same amount of energy is being used when it takes what today would be twice as much energy when it gets twice as difficult. Things should have some way of becoming twice as efficient. And Bitcoin is probably one of those few things that should be worthy of, let's say, 0.01% of the world's energy use. Now, those are going on MIT numbers. I don't know if they're accurate or not, but it's, things to think about. So proof of work, very, very smart, very, very interesting. This is a little bit about looking at the value of the things that we plug in, the value of the energy that this coin uses. And I think that scare tactics against proof of work have much less to do with the electricity being used and much more to do with the central bank digital currencies that do not wish to compete with a free and open market that does not currently have a covert reason for KYC AML. Now, I think that's a whole other power play that is involved. KYC is know your customer. AML is anti-money laundering. These are always the reasons that are used for wanting to gather documentation on every single person that's ever going to trade crypto. So without venturing too far away from proof of work, I hope that I've opened up some ideas, because these are recent events. These are a lot of very important events. And first of all, I believe the stability of the cryptocurrency field, at least at this stage, is dependent on large coins that have been around being allowed to continue being around. One of the big shakeups that's going to happen, and honestly, it might be something that really affects the type of trading work that I do, would be the war against stablecoins. Well, that should point you in the same direction to say this is about the central bank digital currencies. All of this is about government's desire for control and collecting data via that control versus allowing a free market that people have they have freely taken on the risk to be a part of an interest of theirs, possibly to the complete and total financial demise of somebody like Michael Saylor, who is in, therefore, great defense of his investment that he's making, this big risk that he's taking. Elon being in a position to where whoever runs his companies have to deal with an immense amount of red tape and negotiation. And you often deal with governments that move very slow on things that you have to move quickly and lack the understanding, maybe the intellect, maybe just the interest. I don't know. There's a lot of palms greased in the process of making things happen. But I do not think that I'm not completely buying just the free-spirited, whimsical, spontaneous Elon, because I think that he knows who the players are, and he certainly knows that Bitcoin takes energy, and he knows the people that don't like that so much. And what he doesn't know is exactly where that puts him when digital currencies are competing against each other on a global scale. But this is that time where these things are going to be decided. The next several months from, probably before 2021 is over, we will hear a lot about stablecoins versus CBDC. I was talking about it a long time before we got to this point. But now that we are in this place, this is one of my big concerns, is that people who are manipulating the data may be able to convince those who truly don't know more than they know into a fear-mongering process that prevents some of the greatest innovations ever to happen on planet Earth from getting a chance to blossom and to get to the point that they were made for. So that's the way I view this stuff. And whether Bitcoin eventually becomes stabilized or whether it becomes outdone by other things, I think that there is a lot of room in cryptocurrency for the smartest and the best to rise to the top. And I kind of have a little bit of a feeling of who some of those people are. I have, just as much confidence in innovation as I do in government's ability to stomp it out. So we live in such a fascinating time. This is one of those moments in history that I thought I would claim for episode 3, proof of work and the challenges that it places on energy and the challenges that Moore's Law places for Bitcoin to become more and more efficient as it becomes tougher and tougher to keep on target with its own design. What a fascinating time we live in. So I'm going to leave that for you to mull around. I hope that you found this interesting, an efficient use of words. And until episode 4, for now, Crypto Gordon Freeman out.